Hey there, welcome to another 4L60E teardown inspection video. This one's going to be a little bit different in that I'm not going to boil the ocean when it comes to everything that you need to look for when, tearing down a 4L60E, but instead I'm going to focus on 3/4 clutch pack failure, because the story with this thing is that it was freshly rebuilt and purchased by my customer back in 2018 for his 72 El Camino. Car spent a few years going together, through COVID and other things going on, other priorities, but he recently got it back on the road, and I want to say 6 months ago, and put about 4,000 miles on it before the 3/4 clutch pack went out on him on the freeway. So basically, this vehicle is a part-time driver. It's not used for any kind of racing or street strip. It's got a Chevy, 5.3 liter swap, and the engine itself is stock. So nothing crazy, just part-time cruiser, cars and coffee, that kind of thing, and occasional road trips. And that's really what he wanted the overdrive for, and the more efficient modern engine. So anyway, I think this was a flat rate job. I think whoever rebuilt this, whatever shop, they just fixed what was broken. They didn't replace anything else that they didn't have to, that wasn't imminently, necessary at that time. And that's the nature of flat rate work. I mean, they might put a couple $100 into a unit, if that, and they charge around anywhere from $800 to $1,000, and they call it a rebuilt transmission. I guess technically it is, because they had to reassemble it, so they had to rebuild it. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and move the camera a little bit closer, and then we'll get into it. Alright, so here you have the output speed sensor, or vehicle speed sensor. This was the original one. It's definitely not been replaced, so we'll put a new one on. I always replace all the electronics. When he was talking to me about this, I initially thought that the speed sensor itself was a possibility, but the way he was describing the symptoms, where it would catch and then it would slip and then it would go into neutral, led me to believe that this was functioning. Now, if you watch my other videos on it was 4L60E 3/4 comeback after rebuild or something like that, the culprit in that video for that transmission was the speed sensor, so that had crossed my mind. However, in this case, I mean, you can see the fluid is disgusting. Speed sensor is not the issue here, so I've got the wrong socket. All right, 15 millimeters on the extension housing bolts, and 8 millimeter here on the speed sensor bolt. Yeah, that's not original. Or, I'm sorry, that's not replaced. That is original. Is original. Alright, get that torque converter out of the way. Same with the extension housing. Alright, 15 millimeters here on the selector shaft nut. Alright, so let's see what kind of in play we have. 15 to 35 thousandths is what we're looking for. I can't feel any end play, but that doesn't mean anything. Once you get below about 15, it's, especially sometimes it's laden with fluid. Alright, now I can feel it. It's got, I would say, between 10 and 15, maybe 20 at the most, which is actually perfect. So, end play feels good. Don't forget to take off your little O-ring for your converter clutch. Okay, this is in good shape. Alright, and then for these bolts here, I should be able to get them off with the you know, the 1/2 inch impact, but if for whatever reason they're stubborn, I'm just going to heat the case side of the threads so that I can get the kind of wear bond, or you know, whatever you want to call it, broken, and pull each one of them out one by one. Okay, always use 1/2 inch here. Don't use a 3/8 impact. 3/8 is just simply not going to give you enough torque, and you really need that breakaway torque to get at these. Every once in a while, you're going to get one of these that just won't come off no matter what the hell you do. So, one of my viewers had suggested using like a cut-off tool, maybe a Dremel, and just simply cut the head of the bolt right off, and then use like a stud extractor or vice grips to, you know, pull out the rest of the fastener. And that's a good method. I use a combination of heat. Sometimes I drill through the bell housing side and shear the bolt in half, but I actually like my viewer's suggestion better than what I'm used to doing. Alright, we're done with the 1/2 inch, so put that away. So 13mm on the pump bolts, we can get those out now, and then if you want, you can take this off. And the socket I used on the bell bolts is a Torx Plus 50. Do not ever use a Torx 50 standard. You will strip out the heads of those bolts. So this is going to be an 04 or up unit. As you can see, it has the wedge seal. 03 in back, no wedge seal. Alright, let's see if they reused the original servo, 553 servo, or if they used a Corvette servo. I always like to install the Vette servos. That's what this one will get if it doesn't already have it. Alright, a shift kit may have been installed. So, as you can see, there is a golden spacer in here that is included to kind of take up the slack in your band clearance. So, if you watched my part 1, my 700R4 4L60E band clearance video, you know that setting up your band clearance and measuring and adjusting your servo travel is critically important for the health and welfare of that band. I'll do a separate video on common causes for harsh 1-2 shift complaints, but suffice to say, if you have a real harsh 1-2 shift, especially if you don't have any codes, then I would suspect band clearance is excessive, and that's either due to the band being worn or the clearance just simply being excessive, or a combination of those things. Alright, so this is the standard 553 servo that's found in the majority of 4L60E transmissions and some of the 4L65Es that went into the trucks. The Vet and GTO variants did get the Corvette servo. It is my humble opinion that the Vet servo should have been installed in all of them, but you know, that's just me. So yeah, we definitely got a Transgo shift kit installed. These two inner springs here are specifically designed to mitigate that, you know, what we call the 3-2 downshift, or 3-2 bump slide, if you will. It can be very harsh, just depending on other factors. But suffice to say, it is a good move. You could buy a GM part as well. It's available. I'll flash the part number across the screen that does the same thing if you don't want to install the shift kit, but you do want to address, that common symptom. And it's I hate to say it, but it's kind of normal for these transmissions. And you're not going to get rid of it entirely even by installing those springs, but it does mitigate it to a large extent. All right. So I'm going to knock this seal out real quick. Had a little bit too much coffee this morning, so hands are a little jittery, hence why I'm kind of slipping off the seal there. Alright, good news is nothing is bound, nothing is welded together. If this was to spin and this was following right along with it, or was forcing your hand, then that would imply that some things inside the case have either welded or stuck together or bound up, and that, of course, is bad news. Alright, so when it comes to 3/4 failure, the most common cause, in my humble opinion, as well as that based on my experience, is the drum itself, the forward clutch drum. I'm not going to reuse the wiring harness, I never do, so just simply smack it. It'll break all the locking tabs and you'll be able to pull it through. So 13 millimeters everywhere here. This pan has been off, heat draining the fluid, so none of these bolts are going to be tight. You need to add a drain plug, always a good idea. So I suspect that whoever rebuilt this last either didn't check, do what I call a room temperature pressure test on the drum to see if the drum was leaking at the base of the input shaft, or they did and they just didn't care because they didn't want to spend the money. All right. So this must be an 06 unit, but let's take the filter off and see. Oh, 05, okay. Well, it's got an 05 valve body. It has a second design boost valve. That's why I speculated it might be an 06. There is no input speed sensor. The input speed sensor, or turbine speed sensor, was introduced in 2005 with the Vets and I think possibly the GTOs, and then or maybe 1 year later with the GTOs, and then it was installed in pretty much everything that took a 4L60E starting in 2007, I believe. All right, 13mm and roller. Another cause of 3/4 premature failure after overhaul is just simply failing to set the clutch up correctly. Way too much clearance. I mean, that's kind of a universal, universal impairment with these things. Excuse me. Is that too much clearance in that pack is, it's just simply no good. You need to run that pack down to at minimum, in terms of the max clearance, should be no greater than 50 thousandths. And then you can run it as tight as 25 when you're on the bench with it. Just make sure you install the load release springs. So I don't use the load release springs if I'm over 40 thousandths in a factory application, but all high performance applications receive them. So 8mm obviously on those two, 10mm everywhere else except for these three 8mm, and they get they must go back in this same location here. If you watched enough of my videos, I mean, I say that in pretty much all of them. So you're probably used to hearing it by now. But if you're new to these units, this is critically important when it comes to reassembly. You do not want to put these longer 8mm headed bolts anywhere else but these three locations. Alright, so we got 1-2 accumulator, 10mm. Alright, 3/4 failure can also be exacerbated or caused by a leaking third accumulator check ball capsule. It's actually going to be, roughly in this position here, and you can see it once the servo assembly is out of the bore. And this is an aluminum piston, so that's good. If you have plastic pistons here, don't reuse them, put an aluminum piston in there. The plastic pistons like to break. Alright, I'll have to turn the air on to get that off. Another 3/4 failure cause, although this isn't organically unique to the 3/4 failure, I mean, this could cause problems anywhere in the transmission, and that is failing to replace your electronics. So this is your electronic pressure control solenoid. This regulates actuator feed limit pressure to all of your solenoids. So if this fails to do its job, it can cause failure of your applied elements, starting with the 3/4. That's going to be your most vulnerable clutch. And then, if you don't address it or you don't change this out right away, eventually all your, clutch packs and band will burn up. This can cause problems as well. The 3/2 solenoid, when it goes bad, you'll have all kind of odd drivability symptoms associated with the 2/3 and 3/2 transition. So always replace this stuff. And I'm looking at what I see here in front of me, and all of this is original. None of it was replaced. So, I mean, it's a possibility that this wiring harness was dealership new, but I doubt it. Okay, valve body can cause problems with your 3/4 clutch. Okay, if it's worn. Particularly the actuator feed limit valve and the torque converter clutch regulator isolator valve. So it's always recommended that you put a restorative valve here, a corrective valve here, regardless if it's good or not. And then for the AFL valve, Central Valve Bodies makes drop-in slightly oversized actuator feed limit valves that don't require any tools. You just buy it and install it in place of the factory valve. So that'll address a mildly worn bore. So in my experience, the drop-in corrective valves are good if you're at like 5 or at most 6 inches of vacuum under the 15-inch standard. So let's just say this valve here has, I don't know, 8 inches of lift. it's not likely that the drop-in valve is going to fix that. More than likely, you're going to have to ream that bore out and install the Sonic's oversized valve kit. All right, 7 check balls in the valve body. And there go 2 of them. So again, all my valve bodies get fully tested on the Sonic's machine, and they get tested after I, disassemble them, clean them up, and clean all the valve trains. I assemble it as is, no corrective valves, because that allows me to get a baseline for, for what the condition of that valve body was when it came in. Alright, 10 millimeter here, 8 millimeter here. This is the reverse hold down plate. There goes another check ball. If you do not tighten and torque this to spec, all these get between 100 and 108 inch-pounds, then you will have slipping in reverse, and reverse will burnt up in short order unless you correct it right away. So fresh rebuild, you're slipping in reverse, and you did air check the reverse clutch. It air checked fine, no leaking, no issues. Then I would suspect this was not tightened and torqued. Alright, so he's got the white stripe gaskets here. That is correct. 2001 to 2006, I believe. 2007 and up, you start seeing the orange stripe, as well as the bonded spacer plate and gaskets, where the gaskets are bonded to the plate. Okay, cross leaks here can also cause issues with 3/4 and result in 3/4 pack failure. So if your plate is warped, if it's mildly warped, torquing should flatten it, but otherwise, if this surface here is not perfectly flat, or if there's other issues with the plate, or the gasket is torn, you tear the gasket and you don't fix it, or replace it rather, then that can cause problems. It's very rare, okay? Issues with the separator plate and the gaskets are like way down on my list of suspects when it comes to 3/4 failure. Notice here the 1-2 check ball has been repaired. This location likes to aggressively wear. When the ball sticks in the plate, you'll have very, very late harsh 1-2 upshifts. So you don't want that. Alright, those repair sleeves are fits-all. I have a separate video on them, so if you want to learn more, you can check that out. It's out on the channel. Now that wiring harness may actually be new. I'll have to research, because the 04 through 06 harnesses for non-ISS don't quite look like that. Okay, the 3/4 accumulator piston is installed upside down, and it comes with the spring from the Transgo kit. You can have 3/4 failure here as well. If this seal is somehow compromised on the way in, believe it or not, that could stress the 3/4 clutch pack, because you're going to have a leak here at the 4th apply circuit. The accumulator circuit is integrated into the apply circuit. It's not like they're entirely separate. Oil has to pass through this accumulator circuit to apply the band in 4th gear, okay? And same with 2nd gear, so they're integral. So if you have a leak there, then it's going to show up as a drivability symptom. Alright, these are upside down to promote better lubrication flow to the rear gear train. You can do this with the factory piston as well. There's almost nothing you can't do to super firm this shift, other than block the accumulator off. You could do that even in a factory application if you want a robust shift into 4th gear. It's up to you, obviously, but regardless, if you're going to reuse a factory style piston, always replace it, okay? The better move here is a pinless accumulator piston, in my opinion, because it checkmates the common problem of pin bore wear, okay? I mean, you could check yours, but why bother? These are like $2. However, in my opinion, the better move is the Sonic's pinless. You don't need it in the 2nd for factory, stock level or very tight converters, but I would install them in the 4th accumulator position. Okay, shift linkage 13 millimeters on your parking pole guide plate. And And there goes the bolt. Okay, and then 15 millimeters here on the selector shaft nut. Okay, this can be another area, not necessarily due to 3/4, but just, you know, an annoyance. If you don't tighten these, get them real nice and tight when you go back together with it, they will come loose on you. And that, of course, sucks because then you lose your ability to shift into any range position. Alright, let's see if I can get this out. So this is the arrangement. Okay, again, not anything you haven't seen before if you're used to watching my 4L60E teardown videos. This likes to stick. It also likes to wear here on the flats. So it's a good idea to go back with something like a angle grinder and a scruff pad and just smooth everything over. But meanwhile, you can get this out. Usually with just some persuasion with the pry bar. And this one wants to fight me. Of course, when I'm filming, it wants to be difficult. Alright, that's in the trough. Get it later. Alright, selector shaft seal, a small pry bar. They do make tools for these where you can actually pull out the selector seal if it's leaking with the transmission in the vehicle without having to take out the shaft itself and the linkage and all that stuff. Alright. Probably should have emptied the filter. Trying to get organized here on the bench. Forgive me. Probably edit that stuff out. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Alright, so when it comes to the pump, what you want to make sure is you don't want the reverse input drum coming with it, because otherwise the band will be stuck on the band anchor and then it'll be wedged. So what I try to do is see if I can get at this magnet. Alright, so this time we got lucky. Again, this is a relatively fresh rebuild, only 4,000 miles, so this wasn't kind of stuck in there like they usually are. So now we can go ahead and remove the pump without fear of it getting caught up. Alright, so the pump plays an active role in all applied element health, obviously, and if the pressure regulator valve, which is going to be sitting right here, okay, if this valve is worn, then you will have failures both at the 3/4 as well as lube issues. 15 inches of lift is what I like to see. 14 is okay in a factory application. If you have between 10 and 13 inches of lift on the back test machine, then you can go ahead and throw a Transgo gently oversized drop-in PR valve to replace the factory valve, and that'll restore it to working condition. Usually 15 to 17 inches of vacuum is what I see. Now, if you're less than 10, in my experience, that valve is not sufficient, and you need to either ream this bore for their oversized valve, or you could just replace the stator support. You know, whatever you want to do. $13mm, 15 pounds of torque. Okay, this pump may have been remanned. May have been a reman pump. It'll be remanned again. Alright. Fortunately, we have the gasket intact, so You want to look around here on your feed circuits to see if any of these are blown. Sometimes I see it, but it's pretty rare, and I don't see it here. But we do see signs of some heat because it's bonded to the aluminum. You got a little bit of scoring here on the working surface. If it's like this, you can actually take a little bit of sandpaper and touch it up. Just be real careful and go evenly. I would recommend you start at something like 800 grit and work up to like maybe 1,000 to 1,500. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this out here, this whole valve train out. I'm going to just shoot a whole bunch of brake cleaner. I'm going to clean these off. And then we're going to put them back in, and we're going to go over to the back test machine, and we're going to test this pump. Okay, you see the filter, it's got a whole load of debris in there. All right, rotor, the rotor guide is original. This is not new. They don't look, the new ones don't look like that. I mean, you've seen plenty of my videos. Assuming you have, if you haven't, the new rotor guides are all symmetrical as far as their lugs and their tabs. They don't have the gap like this. You can get factory new rotor guides if you want, or you can just buy them in the aftermarket. Doesn't matter. Alright, so this has the single prying or slide spring. So GM went to these starting in 05. Okay, here is your slide. The O-ring in there. Yank that out. It's your pivot pin, and then there's going to be a spring right up in here. Get this out of the way. Don't lose that little spring. I have a small bin full of those. So whoever built this did install a Sonex Teflon pump bushing, so it's a good move there. They did not wallow this out to 5/16. I'll do a separate video because I'm going to do that here. I'll film this. But basically you're going to take a 5/16 drill bit, you're going to come in at an angle, and then you're going to drill this cavity or this conduit all the way out until it terminates. Then you're going to take your 5/16 bit and you're going to drill this. Drill it all the way down until you've opened up that junction between the short side radius and the major radius, all right, and that'll improve drain back. These generally don't have a problem with it, but it's a good idea to do nonetheless. All right, and note the lack of a pump O-ring groove here, no O-ring. So these wedge seal style cases are not compatible with the earlier style pump body with the O-ring. All right, my glove's coming apart, hands getting dirty. I don't like that. I do not like getting my hands dirty. Do not like it. It's not often you hear a technician or automotive guy say that, but and this one again wants to fight. Okay, how you do this is you put a little downward pressure with your snap rings as you engage the two ends, the eye loop, and then you let the spring tension from the PR buffer spring or bumper spring push the boost valve assembly out of the bore. That took way too long, but that's how you do it. So we got our Transgo springs. They replaced the factory springs. We have our valve. So this is your PR valve. You can inspect it. The two flats are machined into this land from the factory. It corrects the insufficient line to lube that the 700R4 pressure regulator valves had. You know, so with a 700R4, basically all you do is you grind that same land in that same position all the way off, and that'll, you know, that'll deal with that problem. Okay, and you don't need like a shift kit or any of that stuff to do it. Just on every 700 R4 you do, you'll wanna take that step. All right, let me put a glove on here. I think I cut the other glove on the sharp casting location here in the stator. It happens. I'm gonna have to replace my towels. And I'm gonna take this opportunity as well to put a new battery in here, because we've been filming for about 30 minutes and that's all these are really good for, about 30 to 35 minutes. If it's real hot out, they're 25 minutes at best. Okay, fresh battery, new shop towels. So we'll go ahead and shoot a whole bunch of brake cleaner. Alright, the main reason I want to do that is so I don't have any kind of contaminant in the bore that could potentially throw off my reading. Alright, I mean that's really the only reason I want to clean it. I mean this is very hasty, very dirty, but is what it is. This can's had enough. All right, one thing I'll remark on that I didn't mention when it comes to the spacer plate and 3/4 clutch is that I would strongly recommend that you drill out your 2-3 feed and your band release. All right, so here's your 2-3 feed and here is your band release. Okay, Transgo recommends 93 thousandths, which for a factory application with a stock converter, meaning stock stall, that's perfectly fine. That's what I would recommend you do. And do it regardless of whether you're installing a shift kit or not. You don't need to install a shift kit necessarily to recalibrate the transmission to shift a little bit better. All you really need to do is make these, you know, subtle modifications hydraulically to the spacer plate and set your clearance correctly for the 3/4 as well as your band clearance. I mean, that's it. Okay, this is going to be a little bit dirty still, that's fine. It's not going to throw the reading off in any way, shape, or form. Just put those back in. Okay, let's go to the vac test machine and we're going to test the boost and the PR valve to see if there's any weakness there. Because I want to know now before I start doing stuff, even before I even take the bushings out, if let's just say this is below 10 inches of vacuum, then I'm just going to chuck this. I might pull the stator shaft out if it's in good shape, but otherwise I'm just going to, you know, I have so many of these, I don't need to ream it. I mean, maybe I'll ream it. Maybe I'll ream it. That's a good idea for a video. So I'll say if it's below 10, then I'll go ahead and ream it and we'll film that so you can see that process. Okay, we have our pump over here. So I want to calibrate the machine first. And to calibrate it, what you're going to do is stick your test hose into the calibration receptacle, and then you're going to turn the machine on. You want to see a steady 5 inches of vacuum here when you turn the machine on with this inserted like that. Then you're going to turn over to the side. You see a calibration port here. Okay, you're going to plug that, and you want to see 25 inches of lift. So this is your pump valve, this is your bleeder valve. To get you to the 5 inches, you're going to adjust your pump valve. To get to 25 inches, once you have the calibration port plugged, you're going to adjust your bleeder valve. And it's that simple. Alright, so I used this yesterday. Looks like we're still right at 5. So we'll go ahead and plug the calibration port. We're right at 25. Back to 5, that's what you want to see. Alright, so you're going to need a couple things to do this with these pumps. This is true of 4L60Es and 700R4s. You're going to need a pencil with an eraser like this, and then you're going to need a pair of needle nose pliers. If you've seen my other videos on these, I mean, you already know. But if you haven't, there's going to be a little port right here on the valve itself, on the main portion of the valve. You need to get that little port exposed so that you can plug it with the pencil eraser to do your testing. Alright, so just get it to where you have access to it, and then you just plug it like this. So we'll go ahead and take the test lead out, plug it into our test block, and then what we're going to do is install our gasket. We're going to go right here. This is the test location for the pressure regulator valve. It's like this hose is a little too long, but is what it is, I guess. So I always run it like this, so I have access to my little port. Alright, so it's going to read about anywhere from 3 to 5 without applying that eraser. We want to see 15 here when I put the eraser. Okay, 14 and a half is good. So, it's 14 and a quarter, 14 and a half. In a factory application, that's perfectly fine. So the pressure regulator valve doesn't appear to be the source of the issue. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we'll test the boost circuit. If we can. Yep, so here's our boost circuit right here. I was looking at this for some reason. Let the crud out of here. So in order to test the boost circuit, you have to plug this port right here, right where my finger is, right there. Otherwise, all the vacuum will escape out of there. Okay, so this is the factory valve and sleeve. And you want to make sure everything is covered. Alright, so we have 12 inches of lift. That's very, very borderline. So you want to see, at bare minimum, a seal of about 18 inches. That's my, that's my spec. That's my requirement. You're not going to find that anywhere other than this video. But I want to see 18 inches here if I'm to consider this boost circuit healthy. 12 inches is very low. Whoever built this, they should have put a Sonex boost valve in here or a Transgo valve or something to, to get this circuit right. All right, let's go back to the bench. All right, now I'm going to ransack the rest of the case because, like I said, I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time on every single component. So I want to get the case empty, and then we'll test the actuator feed limit valve in the valve body once the case is kind of out of the way, so to speak. Alright, so our 2-tab thrust washer, it's non-selective, and then for the band, it should already be disengaged. So just pull everything out. Alright, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and inspect your splines here if you have a no movement condition. Every once in a while we'll see that. In fact, it looks like we have a good example of what spline wear actually looks like. So you see the disruption in the wear pattern here. Okay, you could see it. It's visually apparent. All right, these splines are worn, so this would not be a good candidate to reuse as an assembly, even if there's nothing wrong with the sealing integrity down here at the base of the shaft, which I'm guessing there is, but you know, we'll see in a little bit. Okay, this is number 69. Always put the number face down toward the drum. And his bearing feels fine. It's a good practice to replace these anyway, because they do take pretty much the brunt of the thrust force between the rest of the case and the back of the pump. Okay, here's the band. So, as you can see, we have some lining. The lining has been stripped off. Look at that. It's all the way around the band. The band has been stripped. Not that you ever reuse the band, but that band's no good. So, a lot of times that is caused by warpage in the drum, which means somebody did not replace this drum or have it turned. And somebody else did not have a rag handy. So as you can see, I mean, look at that. You can see the matching wear patterns. So anymore, I've basically increased my price by the cost of this drum, and I replace them all. Every single rebuild. I don't mess around anymore. Unless I have a reason to turn the drum, I just replace it, and it's rare that I have a reason to turn or go with a used drum instead of a new one. You can see the wear on the lugs too. Yeah, this was a judgmental error on the part of the builder, not replacing this. Alright, reverse clutches for 4,000 miles. I see some signs of heat. It is possible that this may have been a little low on fluid, but I can't say. Looks like the builder did install here, and this is a good thing. He did install another Sonex Teflon pump body bushing. That's perfectly fine to install there. It's a great little upgrade. I don't think this was replaced, this rear bushing here. If these bushings in the reverse drum are not replaced, this thing will ride asymmetrically on the stator. Always checking here too, make sure that there's no sealing ring groove wear. 2006 late through 2008. I see a disproportionate amount of these come in with sealing groove wear, and what happens is the sealing rings on the input shaft get stuck because the grooves either warp or they were undersized to begin with, and because they can't rotate freely on the shaft, they start digging into the inner diameter of the stator bore. So if you're working on a late model unit, be real, pay real close attention to that, because I've seen it a lot with the, like I said, maybe even late 05 through 2008. I don't see it too much in the 09 and ups for whatever reason. Maybe they corrected the problem. Checking here too for wear. Okay, I mean that would explain potential slippage in the low reverse, or excuse me, the reverse input. All right. I'm going to fill this cavity with some fluid. We'll reposition the camera, and then we're going to see if this has leaks here at the base of the shaft. If it does,
that would by itself potentially explain the complete and total 3/4 failure with only 4,000 miles on this rebuilt transmission. Now, these look fine. These steels look okay. No issues there. But like I said, you have some signs of heat. You see it a little bit on the inner diameter. Again, 4,000 miles, you shouldn't see any signs of overheating. All right, give me a second and we'll test this thing. Okay, let's see what kind of shape this drum's in. So this is going to be our 2-3 feed. This is going to be our forward feed. And then over here is our coast clutch feed, and you always want to plug the forward feed when you pressure test the coast clutch. So going to use between 50 and 75 psi. That's what you want. You really don't need any more than that. If you don't have a fully assembled drum, you're just testing it with the pistons and return springs and whatnot installed, you know, no clutch packs, then I would recommend 30 to 50 psi, and you have to be real careful. All right, so finally got a new rubber tip on the nozzle. Been procrastinating forever. I think of nothing as spending literally thousands of dollars on tooling and equipment, but you know, I don't want to spend $2 on a set of these rubber tip nozzles. I don't know what the hell's wrong with me. Okay, so let's see what we got. Interesting. One thing you want to do, and I know this, I mean, sounds a little, I don't know, I don't want to say common sense, but like, just, you know, mess with the shaft, try to push it in, try to pull it out. Every once in a while, you'll actually get one that's literally finger tight and loose, like it'll move. It's supposed to be a press fit, but, you know, it has lost its press fit. All right, I mean the shaft is no good for reasons explained earlier because of those splines, but we don't have a leak here at the base. I was expecting that, but it's not what I'm seeing. Forward. Okay, air is staying trapped in the circuit. I mean, that's perfect. So, coast clutch. I mean, look at all that air. So the sealing integrity in the drum is actually pretty damn good. Again, not expecting that at all. And the 3/4s look perfectly fine. So something happened in here. I mean, they appear to be fine. I shouldn't say that until I actually get the clutch out, but let's see, maybe it's his forwards that burnt. So, no load release springs. I mean, there's literally no signs of heat or impairment on that friction. He's got two thinner steels. These are 700 R4, I believe. See, 60 thousandths. So So I have tons of these as well, but those are, I believe, aftermarket. Or they might be very early 700R. I honestly am not recalling off the top of my head. So let's see, we got 2 seals, 2 frictions, seal, friction, seal, friction, seal, friction, seal, friction. So that gives us 6 frictions and 6 seals. So whenever you have thinner steels in a clutch pack, generally speaking, you want them either at the bottom or the middle of the pack. So he had a spacer steel in here. I'm not sure exactly where it was. I didn't pay attention, but I'll watch the footage. But needless to say, there's no signs of slipping, there's no signs of excessive heat. Very interesting. Alright, there's one more thing with the pump that I'm going to check as well, and that's the clearance between the rotor, the slide, and the pump body deck surface. We'll do that in a little bit. Back. I'm sorry. Let me put this clutch back together. I want to see the clearance. Now that we know we're working with a healthy clutch, I want to see what the clearance looks like. So let's see. Yeah, that's what he did. He put a spacer right underneath. That looks to me like it's maybe 30. This is a 30 thou feeler gauge, and it's fitting in where, you know, there's contact being made on both the snap ring side of the gauge as well as the backing plate side. So 30 to 33 thousandths is what I'm going to estimate. So subtract 3 to 5 thousandths based on how much, in my experience, this clutch will grow once it's, you know, back in relative to what it checks out on the bench. And I would say he probably set this to 30 to at most 35 thousandths, but I have a 16 and a 17 here in my hand, and with a little bit of light to moderate pressure, it's going in. So I would say this was probably set at 30 thousandths, which is perfect. I mean, that's what you want. He used a steel to do it, which, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but point is that this clutch pack appears to have been set up correctly in all other respects. So, I mean, the fluid is absolutely filthy. So I gotta figure out and locate the source of all this, you know, burnt up clutch material, because I was fully expecting it to be the 3/4 clutch pack, but I'm thinking not enough material has come off the band, but it could certainly have been band, and the band, not the 3/4, may have been neutralizing in 4th gear. but he said he could not achieve more than about 25 miles an hour, you know, once the initial episode, you know, began to take place. Christ. I gotta get a different screwdriver for this stupid clutch. I need something like this, but thicker, you know, with the grooves on the end of it so we can grab this stupid snap ring. Especially during videos, because then I look like a horse's ass trying to get it out. Alright. Let's take a look at the forward clutch and the coast clutch. Forward steels look perfectly fine. Forward clutch looks perfectly fine. And then there is your backing plate for your coast clutch. Backing plate for the forwards. Bearing feels okay. And this is supple. Alright, let's take a look at the input sprag. See if this was replaced or not. You usually tell just based on the two retainers on either side of the element. Just depending on, you know, when it was purchased, they could look like this bronze appearance. They could be, you know, silverish in color. Lately I've been seeing bronze, but like heat treated. Okay, this looks heavily worn to me. I mean, you can see it was making hard contact. And it's warped. I don't think this was replaced. Now this sprag overruns in 4th gear, so it's not working in 4th. It's holding and working in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd gear. So a new one will be installed, but yeah, wear on both sides. I mean, I believe that's the original sprag that came with this unit from the factory. Okay, let's look at the race. The race should be nice and smooth. If your sprag rolls, you have to replace the race, meaning, you know, this portion. You have to replace the outer race as well. You never ever want to reuse the gear components if you're, you know, if you have a rollover and failure at the forward sprag. I mean, it held in my hand, but that don't mean anything. Here's the coast clutch hub. Looks fine. Steels and frictions, 2 and 2, they look fine. Alright, I'm gonna pull the, you know, compress the return spring, pull the snap ring off, and then we'll look at the pistons and see if there's anything that they could tell us. Alright, return spring, everything else. Now we're just going to blow all the parts out. So here's your 3rd clutch piston. Appears to be perfectly fine. Still supple. All these will have a number 7 stamped here on the 3/4 apply ring. So all 4L60Es. Appears fine. I mean, we have not seen any impairment, any damage, any degradation in any of the clutches in this Ford drum. So these pistons appear new to me. They're very, very soft. You know, you don't see any kind of heat staining or any just normal discoloration that you kind of see with pistons that were installed from the factory. You know, the original pistons. So the builder did replace those. The only thing so far that I've seen questionable is the band and the drum, you know, the reverse input drum. He did have all 4 points of contact for the snap ring on the locking bosses, so he had it positioned like that. That's correct, that's what you want. He doesn't quite have it here, but again, like, that's, don't get me wrong, that's important, but I mean, I've seen plenty come in where they were not like that from the factory, and they did not pop out or anything. All right, let me yank that accumulator piston out of there while I got you here kind of close up. So this is going to have only the outer or the inner spring, I'm guessing. Oh no, it's got both. Okay, so you have your Transgo springs. You have to watch these. I've seen far too many come in broken, the Transgo springs for the 1.2 accumulator, to think it was just like a one-off. So I've heard people say that the Sonic springs for this this housing also break. I've seen factory springs break. I mean, this accumulator works hard, and it's worked hard, so spring failure or breakage is common if you have a harsh 1-2 shift all of a sudden and you have no codes. And when I say all of a sudden, I mean literally, you know, earlier in the drive cycle 1-2 shift was perfectly normal and suddenly it started bang shifting. Pull that accumulator housing off and check your springs. My guess is that the outer spring has broken if it's a factory setup. If it's a Transgo setup, one or more of those springs may have broken. Alright, so you want to inspect the drum itself, check around here, check these lugs too. I mean, we got a lot of wear on these lugs. I would not have reused this. There's no way in hell this is only 4,000 miles worth of lug wear here for the reverse input clutch. So if it went back together and the lugs looked like that at the time, then that's another judgmental error on the part of the builder. I would never reinstall a drum that has lug wear like this. That's just my opinion, but I just wouldn't do it. Alright, let me get these things out of the way and bring back pump body. Alright, this is just going to be a down and dirty check. All I want to see is what the clearance is here between the working surface, the rotor and the slide, the very top, and the deck surface. So when you do this, do not install your slide support O-ring or the support or retainer itself. Leave those two things out. All you're going to do is install the slide and the rotor. That is it. Okay, I have a separate video on this, so if you want to skip this part or watch that, you've already seen it, or you know, this is nothing new to you, that's perfectly fine. But I like to check this stuff too, just from a diagnostic or forensic examination standpoint. You know, I'm trying to figure out what caused a given transmission to fail, a direct cause. That's what I'm always after. Root cause is not as important immediately, but it is important when it comes to, you know, depending on what it is, talking to the customer. I mean, it could be lack of maintenance, and then the customer needs to understand that, you know, he can't neglect the transmission. It's not going to, you know, it's a mechanical device like anything else parts wear, and you got to keep up with it. So, you know, other times it could be something else entirely. It has nothing to do with the customer. Could be a materials failure. It could be just simply normal wear and tear. Hey, transmissions wear out. It is what it is. Alright, I'm going to elevate the camera a little bit. There we go. So what I'm going to do here is check the clearance. And what I have in my hand is a 1.5 thou feeler gauge. So I'm going to see if I can fit that in. If it fits easily, then we'll check with a 2 thou gauge. Now, clearance spec between the slide and the deck surface is up to 2 thousandths, between 1 and 2 thousandths of an inch. For the rotor, it's between 1 and 1.5 thou. Okay, looks like we got a little bit of passage here, but it's tight, it's dragging heavily, and we have none here. On the rotor, we have none. And we have none. So now I want to see if I can move this without moving the straight edge. I'm going to rotate the rotor inside the slide. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the slide. I'm just going to move it around a little bit and see if I can move the straight edge, or if it will allow me to, you know, move this without the straight edge being moved. Okay, so the rotor's good. That's basically 1 thou clearance. I mean, if it's tighter than 1 thou, that could be a problem as well. So here's my 1 thou feeler gauge. I don't know if you can see that, but 0.001. Yeah, I know, it's not real legible. Okay, we got a little bit of clearance on that side. And like I said, you really, this is down and dirty. You want to perform this check when the pump is completely clean and it's obviously filthy. So there could be a little bit of fluid that's actually influencing or impacting the results. But suffice to say, though, there isn't an excessive amount of clearance in here, and the stator support looks like it was machined. I mean, it's got a little bit of scoring, but I mean, very, very little. And that's only in the area here, and I guess a little bit right here. But I believe this was machined, so good on the builder for doing that. Alright, I'm now going to evacuate the rest of the case, so get this a little bit closer. And then that'll be it as far as the teardown itself. Alright, so here's our front plant. And just do the usual checks. This bearing appears okay. It's a little bit of vertical play, a little bit more than I like to see, so I mean, you could visually see the gap. So I think I'm going to have him replace this planet. Should check the captured bearing. That feels fine. And then this surface in here looks good. Everything looks good except the vertical plane and the pinions. Okay, 03 and up. Your reaction shaft had a step here. It was machined to take this bearing and replace the bronze thrust washer that came in all the 700s and earlier 4L60Es. So again, lugs should be scrutinized for wear, grooves, etc. This is the 3/4 clutch hub. If it's worn or you got grooves here, you'll have dragging and or inconsistent apply. So your 2-3 shift will feel weird sometimes. So anything like that, just replace it. And then the reaction shaft itself, check the journal here. If you have a lubrication issue, it'll show up as a lot of heat and bluing and, scoring and whatnot. This is heat treatment from the factory. This should not be construed with, or misconstrued with, wear or damage. Alright, sun shell, let's see if it was replaced. Looks like it was. This is a heat treated version. Only 4,000 miles on it. So we don't even see any wear in this area, where it usually starts to happen around the 25 to 30,000 mile mark. And then depending on the individual shell and the quality of the metal, sometimes this will separate. The neck with the splines will separate from the body and you'll have no reverse second and fourth. That shell looks fine. I mean, I'm going to put a new one in it just to reset the clock to 0 anyway, but still, nothing wrong with that shell. Alright, now we'll go ahead and get the snap ring out of here for the center support. And I just use a screwdriver with a notch cut in it. I don't know what the hell it is with me today. Alright, make sure that the ends of the snap ring straddle the anti-clunk spring. They should never overlap the spring. Okay, time for a battery change out. Alright, new battery. So let's grab the rear sun gear. So standard factory bushing. Otherwise the rear sun gear looks okay. No chipped teeth or stripped splines or what have you. Looks fine. Alright. So now what we need to do is get in behind this thing and take a hammer and beat the output shaft forward so that we can push everything else, center support, rear gear train, out of the case. So put some stuff away, get some other stuff out of the way. Alright, some of these things, it's just a few whacks. Sometimes you're going at it for quite some time and you have to take the case and, turn it inverted. And if you're working with like a one-piece case, that's not as easy to do. And this one's caught up on the ring gear. And there goes the screwdriver. So, might as well look at the output shaft real quick while it's in my hands. And I'm just checking splines, I'm checking the journal. Looks like there was some contact being made right here. So, don't like to see this. It indicates potentially a lubrication issue. Alright, low reverse clutches are going in so fine. However, this is not fine. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Woo! Well. Well, well, well. All right. He did not mention any problems in reverse. And this fragment here is from the wiring harness, the locking tabs. So, did not mention any problems in reverse, but what you see here is a thing that should not be. I mean, that looks like a well-executed weld bead. So I mentioned this in my low reverse deep dive, but I believe the number is 7225 or 7255, something like that. Transgo, or it's not Transgo, ATSG has it in their manual to replace any low reverse pistons that have that casting number with this part right here. Needless to say, he will be getting a new low reverse piston, or at least a good used replacement or something. Remember what I was talking about? Ensuring that you have your all four locking bosses engaged. So that may not have been done here, or he just simply didn't have the snap ring all the way in. And admittedly, sometimes it's tough to confirm or deny that. You know, these snap rings are not all exactly the same. There are some variations. Some look like this, some have a wider gap to them. You know, when you assemble this thing, you can't really test it with just the piston installed. You have to have the whole clutch in there. And you know, all you have to go on is how the clutch applies and releases. You can't physically see anything because of the way it's designed. So, and that's the same for the same reason you can't take any direct measurement of clutch clearance. It has to be an indirect measurement. So, what may have happened here is he simply did not, meaning the builder, did not install that snap ring, get it fully installed. My guess is just knowing, because I've done it a few times, not where it's going out the door and this happened, but I've had it where you would have 3 out of 4 maybe fully engaged and 1 partially engaged, but it's just above the groove in the case, but it looks like it's on, but it's not. So you really got to eyeball it. So we have the rear bearing welded to the hub here. So this can be replaced independently of the parking gear. So that's what we'll do. I have plenty of these. where this was no good, this portion, but the reaction portion was fine, the spline portion. So as you can see, the snap ring, so we'll put a new one. But this could have caused his symptoms. I mean, this is unusual. Unusual in that it wouldn't allow him to go over 35 miles an hour. So instead of a fibrous materials failure, this could be some kind of variation on a hard part failure driven by what I believe is an assembly error. I mean, that could be a failure too, materials failure, but I don't think so. Alright, we got more loose pinions here vertically. So he's going to need a planet too. I don't know if this is from the factory or if this, what I'm looking at is this parting line here in each of these pinions. Let me go grab another one. So here's one out of my drawer. I don't see that parting line. I'll have to look at a whole bunch, but he'll need a output reaction shaft or spline portion, and then he's going to need 2 planets, front and a rear. The sun gears themselves look fine. Alright, let me get the case to where you can see into it. Here's that anti-clunk spring I was talking about earlier. I'm going to see if there's any damage to the case. So then we're going to have to swap the case. I think there is some damage. If so, we're going to have to acquire a case. Alright, let me see if I can zoom in. Alright. So as you can see, there is a lot of wear down there on that hub, and I think the snap ring groove may have been machined away. So remember I said at the beginning the end play was set just about perfect? Well, it's possible that the end play was not so perfect, in that it may have had an interference fit in this thing, to where these bearings were basically sandwiched between the pump and the rear of the case, and something had to give, and so it was the rear bearing. And as a result, all that pressure on that return spring assembly caused the snap ring to pop out. And that resulted in this mess. Keep forgetting I'm zoomed in. So I believe that's what happened. He's going to need a case. He's going to need a case. He's going to need 3 planets. 2 planets, excuse me, 3 planets. A reaction carrier, or whatever, that rear portion of the rear ring gear assembly. In addition to all the usual stuff. Okay, we're going to put a wide 2/4 band in here with a brand new reverse input drum. The Transgo kit I'm probably just going to put back in. I will make him aware that those springs in the 1-2 accumulator, they can break. So if all of a sudden it starts shifting real harsh 1-2, I'll give him some instructions on what to do. He's a handy guy. He builds all his own cars. He pretty much does everything on a car other than the transmission. So, you know, doing something like this is no biggie for him. Forward drum assembly. That drum assembly is no good. It's got spline wear and lug wear. You know, roller assemblies, one-way assemblies, and with the center support. A little bit of wear on the frictions. Let me back out. Sorry about that. A little bit of wear on the low reverse clutch. I mean, you would expect to see a lot of wear, save for the fact that this clutch is never on other than in reverse. So everything's captured back there, and there is enough spring material in this assembly, this return spring assembly, to give him the ability to go into reverse. But now we know why there was a little bit of heat in the reverse input clutch, because of the stresses caused by a severely damaged and impaired low reverse clutch pack, or low reverse assembly. The clutch pack itself appears okay, but this failure had cascading effects throughout the case and resulted in all kind of problems. I have to look at a power flow diagram to see exactly how this would cause the transmission's inability to enable speeds of greater than 25 or 30 miles an hour, because the drum checked fine, the 3/4 clutch wasn't burnt. You know, we were thinking that was 3/4 failure. That's what I told him on the phone. I said, hey, you probably have 3/4 clutch failure. You know, if it was slipping, but when he got here, we talked about it possibly being speed sensor, because you know, that could be it could be a cause as well, but it's not likely. I mean, despite what you saw in my other video, if you watched it, that's the first time I have ever seen anything like that, and I haven't seen anything like it since. But I'm sure other builders that have done a lot more of these than I have, maybe they have come across it, especially those that are full service shops. I'm just a bench builder, so you know, they get the whole vehicle in and they can do all kind of diagnostic work, take it for test drives, and you know, do all kinds of stuff that I wouldn't be privy to. So anyway, I'm going to end the video here. I think I'm satisfied in terms of like what happened. I was a little concerned just before we got to this last section, because you know, I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe we have another speed sensor problem. I mean, he still needs an overhaul. This fluid is still filthy. Everything is no good in here, but that may have been the initial failure. The other possibility is a torque converter, but I emptied the converter off camera, and I didn't see anything coming out of it. We didn't see the usual signs of converter failure in the pan. He didn't, you know, make mention of anything either. He just said the fluid was black when he dropped the pan. All right. Well, as always, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or if you have any other ideas or thoughts or input as to what happened here, please go ahead and put it down there, and I'll respond. As always, thank you so much for watching. Greatly appreciate all your viewership. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. You know, if you're interested in 4L60Es, I'm always doing them, so chances are I'm always going to be putting out more videos. Like I said, I will do a video on how to drill the pump. I had a couple requests in the comments of other videos, so I'm going to do a dedicated video on that as well. But anyway, as always, enjoy the rest of your day or evening, and look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks again.